One of the most unusual parshas in the Torah is the parsha of Bilam. Parsha of Balak, the story where Hashem gives nevuah, gives prophecy to a Gentile prophet, Bilam Hanavi. Basically what happens is Balak hears that the Jewish nation is overrunning every one of their enemies. He's then the king of Moab. He sends a messenger to Bilam. I want you to curse the Jewish people. I know you're given special powers. I want you to curse the Jewish people. Bilam, despite the fact that he was extraordinarily arrogant, had to admit the fact that he could do nothing without Hashem's permission. So he told those messengers, wait here. Hashem only appears to me in the evening, at night. I'll hear what Hashem has to say. If Hashem will allow me to go curse the Jews, I will. If not, I cannot. In any case, that evening, Hashem himself appears to Bilam. And right away, Bilam says something unusual. Balak melech Moav shalach elai. You know Hashem who sent messengers to me? Balak, the king of Moab. The king of Moab sent messengers to me to honor me, to ask me if I'll curse the Jewish people. And Rashi is bothered by the fact that obviously Hashem knows Balak is the king of Moab. Bilam knows it, Hashem knows it. Why is Bilam stressing the fact that Balak, the king of Moab, sent messengers to honor me? Says Rashi, because he was saying something to Hashem. Hashem, even though you don't consider me important, you should know I really am important. You may not think of me as anything significant, but you should just know the king of Moab, Balak himself sends messages to me. That's how important I am. And that's how Rashi explains why he mentions the king of Moab at that point. Now, if you think about this Rashi, it is rather perplexing. Number one, you're talking to God, the creator of the heavens and the earth and all that it contains. I don't care how powerful, how mighty little Balak is. You're talking to Kadosh Baruch Hu. So if you want to tell him that you're important because important people speak to you, you're not impressing anyone with the fact that a mortal flesh and blood king speaks to you. But more than that, this Rashi is rather difficult to understand. Because this human being was given more honor than any other human being maybe in existence. Do you know what it means to be a Novi Hashem? Prophecy is a level that requires decades and decades of perfection. The Rambam explains, a Novi is a man who worked on himself for literally tens and tens of years. He perfected his midos. He got to a point where nothing distracts him. And then if he's on a very high level, he goes to study by a Novi. He's a Ben Novi. He's in training. Because it's not enough to be a great tzaddik. It's not enough to be a tremendous Talmid Chacham. You have to learn this malacha, this type of profession called being a prophet. And he goes to a Novi, he's a Ben Novi, and he studies. He's an apprentice of many years. And the Rambam explains that most people in that state maybe got a nevuah, got Hashem to speak to them once in their life. Some Nevi'im got Hashem, actually spoke to them a few times, but it was very exceptional and very rare to have the creator of the heavens and the earth himself come speak to a mortal flesh and blood. And by the way, you should know, it was an extraordinary experience, meaning everything physical blocks me from seeing Hashem. It was an out-of-body experience, something miraculous, and that moment was etched in a Novi's existence forever. He had reached a pinnacle when Hashem spoke to him. It was unprecedented. Bilam did not work for this. Bilam was granted it for free. But he wasn't granted just a regular level of nevuah. He was granted the level of nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Hashem, fully conscious. That is the type of nevuah that Bilam had. He was singled out from the entire human race. The reason had nothing to do with him. Hashem felt that the Gentile nations would have a claim, that the Jewish people had Nevi'im. Had we had a prophet would have sent us on the right way, we'd be different also. So Hashem gave them a prophet and said, let's see what this prophet does for you. But here's the point. Of the entire race of humanity, there was one man selected for this honor, to have God himself speak to him on a regular basis with the highest level of nevuah, and that's Bilam. So how does he say to Hashem, if you don't think I'm important, you should know Balak, the king of Moab, thinks I'm important. There's probably no human being who's given more honor, more accord, more dignity than you. What do you mean, if Hashem, you don't think I'm important? If Hashem didn't think you were important, Hashem wouldn't speak to you. So this Rashi is rather difficult to understand, and what I'd like to see this evening is if we can in fact better understand what this Rashi is teaching us. And to do that, what I'd like to do is take a little tour of something that we never really focus on much, and that is the tour of the human being, as in you and I. And I think if you spend even a little bit of time trying to understand yourself, I think you'll quickly find that we are the most complex, most difficult to understand creatures on the face of the planet. I have an important saying that I've been saying now for maybe 20 years. The human being is a very, very strange creation, and I too am a human being. You see, it's very easy to watch other people when they do things that are really strange, when they do self-destructive things, when they lose their temper and become a different person, when their entire emotionality becomes hijacked, and they say the most foolish things. It's very easy to be a student of other people and see how strange those things called human beings are, and that's a good practice, provided you follow it up with the I too am a human being, and then you search yourself and you find that I too do the very same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to people on a regular basis, and I cannot tell you how many times someone comes to me with a problem, with an issue, with a situation, and I say to myself, you know, I also have that. Maybe not to that same extent, maybe it's not debilitating, but there's a simple reality that we human beings are constantly being hijacked, constantly being doing things that are so strange to ourselves, doing things that if we thought about it, if we'd step out of ourselves and look at it, we'd say, what in the world is going on? And the reason why we human beings do things that are difficult for us to understand is because we human beings are quite complex. The conscious I that I'm speaking to you am comprised of two distinct components. One component, the Ramchal explains, is made up of what he calls the seichel, which includes imagination, it includes simply memory, it includes the seichel, intelligence, and it also includes ratzon. The conscious I has a brilliant, precise thinking part to it. It also has an imaginative part. It also has memory. It also has will. That part is also sometimes controlled by another part. There's a nefesh bahami within me, a complete animal soul, as much as you'll find in any animal in the animal kingdom. Within me are the appetites and desires to keep the human being alive. Search the animal kingdom, you'll find every single animal in the wild has all of the instincts, all of the desires to keep itself alive and keep the next generation in existence. Within me are all of those as well. And the I, the conscious I who think, the conscious I who is speaking to you now, am comprised of two vastly different parts, each competing for primacy, each fighting. And if you'd like to fundamentally understand yourself, I have a mashal that I think is very, very important. Siamese twins today live much longer than they ever did before. Because of surgeries and because of various advances in medicine, a co-joined set of twins can often survive. Typically, the doctors will try to separate them. Often they'll be able to have both survive, but there are some rare exceptions where you'll have co-joined twins, Siamese twins, who remain joined together for life. Now, sometimes it comes out that they're actually very highly functional, live full, complete lives. And there are quite a number of pairs alive today who actually function as fully effective human beings. But here's the strange part. You'll see 2 legs, 2 arms, and 2 heads. And if you don't look very carefully, you think it's one person, but it's 2 distinct people. There's a set of co-joined twins who drive. One controls the right side, one controls the left side. I don't know who came up with this wise idea, but they made them take 2 driving tests. Even though it's one body and it can't go without the other, but because there are 2 heads and 2, they made them take 2 driving tests. But they're 2 distinct people, 2 different personalities, 2 very, very different, and they have different senses of humor, different levels of intellect, different interests. They do share one body, but very, very different. There's also a set of Siamese twins who teach 5th grade. Basically, it's rather unique to see, because again, you'll see one body and they're in the classroom, and one is teaching and the other is observing. You ever have, when I was a kid, there was always that teacher who always caught me doing things wrong, and she would say, oh, I have eyes in the back of my head. I mean, this is real. I mean, you have one teacher teaching and the other one literally observing and seeing what's going on. In any case, they do share 2 minds, they do share 2 personalities, but they do share also one bloodstream. So what happens if one of them likes to drink and the other one doesn't? Well, sorry, Charlie, both of you guys are getting drunk. And what that means in plain, simple language, we have Tom and Peter, and Tom likes to drink and Peter doesn't. Well, tough luck, Peter, the minute that alcohol gets into the bloodstream, you share that bloodstream, and unless you slap his hand quick before he drinks it down, you're both going to be drunk. And if you'd like to understand the I, as in you and I, you have to understand that I am constantly competing with this other half of me. There's a half of me that doesn't care about anything other than its desires. That means to say there's a full half of my personality that only knows instincts and desires, drives and needs. And that's very real. And if you deny it, you don't understand yourself. I also have another part of the conscious I that understands consequences, understands results. And as long as that part of I remains in control, I act sober, I act intelligent. But sometimes I get drunk. When that other part of me takes control and I get angry, I'm furious. I now am drunk with anger. I no longer view things the same way. I no longer think the same way. I might have been careful with every word I said. I might have regarded people with great, great respect. But the minute I get overcome, drunk with anger, that part took control and I am gone. And I'm constantly being hijacked because, again, there are two parts, and these two parts are competing, and these two parts make up the I. However, if you believe that it ends there, I believe that you're selling yourself tremendously, tremendously short. That is but a tip of the iceberg of understanding the conscious I. Let me explain to you what I mean. Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. What is the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness? So, as you know, PETA has an interesting claim. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals claim that four-legged animals and two-legged animals are all occupants of the same planet. What right does a two-legged animal have to consume, to barbarically eat a four-legged animal? It's horrific. And PETA is a very violent, very vile organization, and they even take out very disgusting ads. You'll see an ad showing an Auschwitz bunker and saying Hitler may have killed 6 million Jews, but Frank Perdue kills 6 billion chickens. And here's the problem. It's obvious to you and I that that's beyond ludicrous. But the problem is why? You see, man always answered that question by saying because man has feelings and animals doesn't. Man uses tools, animals don't. Man has a consciousness, animals don't. Well, the problem is it seems not to be true. Animals have feelings. Animals use tools. And the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, which was comprised of some of the greatest scientists of our day, basically declared that animals have a conscious sense of self, as do man. So if they use tools, if they have feelings, if they have a conscious sense of self, how are they any different than you and I? So the next time you sit down to a hamburger, as you're about to bite into it, I want you to ask yourself, what's the difference? Elsie the cow had a heart that pumped. I have a heart that pumped. Elsie the cow had meat and flesh and all that good stuff and skin, and so do I. What is the difference between me and Elsie the cow? And ladies and gentlemen, they are 100% right. From their perspective, there is no difference. But it's not because PETA values human beings as it's because they view human beings as animals. You see, when you're sitting down to eat that hamburger, if you say the words, I and Elsie the cow are exactly the same, then you are the same. Because what you've done is you so lowered the human being. What you've done is you began identifying as the body. I am this corporeal body, much like Elsie the cow is a body with some interesting features. She eats grass, she moves. I am a body, I go, I speak, and I walk. But if you think of yourself as a body, then PETA's right. And the first step that you have to do is to recognize that I am the one inside. I'm housed in this body like an astronaut temporarily wearing the suit, but I, the conscious I, am the part inside. I wear this body, I use this body, but I am completely, utterly spiritual. And one of the most important steps a human being can ever make is to realize that I'm not physical, I am spiritual. And I think this is one of those gross errors that people make all the time. Sometimes it'll be a Rosh Hashanah, it'll be a Yom Kippur, and a person will say, wow, it's so strange. I had this spiritual experience. I was in shul, and I was like talking to Hashem. It was so strange because here I am, this physical entity, and I was temporarily having this spiritual experience. Nothing could be further from the truth. You are not a physical being temporarily having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual entity. I, the one who thinks, I, the one who feels, am a spiritual entity temporarily having a physical experience. I'm inside this body for a few short years. Eventually, the body's going to be put in the ground and I will separate. But I'm not the body. And once you do that step, then you're ready to understand a little bit more about what makes us tick. And the Ramchal in the Derech Hashem explains very, very graphically that there's a whole other part of I that you and I are not aware of. We're aware somewhat of the conscious I. And that Mashal of the Siamese twins has to do with the part that we're alert to. But there's a whole other part of the neshama that you and I are completely not attuned to. He calls it the neshama elyona, and there are 5 parts to it. There's a neshama yechida, ruach. It's a very complex system. But if you'd like to understand what he's referring to, here's a very simple observation. We all hear the expression neshama yisera. On Shabbos, you get an extra neshama. Now, do you know a human being who has said, wow, Shabbos came in, I got this, whoa, this neshama yisera overcame me. And I was like, floating, out-of-body experience. I was like, what? Now, if they do speak that way, ask them what they were smoking, what they were drinking, because that's not what happened. You will not feel it. You won't be alert to it. The neshama yisera comes and it leaves. But don't think it does nothing. Oh, it does something very, very real. You see, the neshama elyona, the upper neshama, is responsible for directing me, for guiding me. It has 2 separate, completely different functions. One function is it's responsible to pull me in the way that it will. And I'll explain to you what I mean. You ever eat a meal, and about an hour after you start grazing, you go down to the kitchen and you look through the refrigerator, and someone says to you, are you hungry? No, I'm not hungry, I just ate a big meal. So what are you doing? What you're doing is I am hungry, but I'm not hungry, meaning I don't have hunger pangs, I don't have an empty stomach. So what are you doing? There's sort of a longing, sort of an inclination, sort of, I don't know. That is a comparable sense to what your neshama does all the time. You see, neshama elyona is not allowed to speak clearly in your conscious mind. That would take away free will. But it does pull you. It pulls you to everything good, everything proper. That's what pulls you to do what's right. That's what says to you, what are you wasting your time for? Why aren't you accomplishing? When you said something that's nasty or selfish, that guilty feeling inside was your neshama elyona that was saying to you, what are you doing? Ugh. Now again, it can't speak in conscious words, and it can't influence you overtly, because that would take away free will, but it pulls you, always pulls you, always pulls you to the good, to what's right and proper. That part, the neshama elyona, is very, very complex and very, very sophisticated. It came from under the Kisei HaKavod and knows exactly every answer to every question that you'll ever have. It's programmed with every desire only to do what's right, holy, and proper. And one of its main purposes is to pull me towards good. But it has a totally different purpose altogether. The neshama elyona has a purpose that has nothing to do with pulling me to good. And if you'd like to understand what that is, I'll share with you. Chazal tell us that on Rosh Hashanah, malachim yechafezin. You ever hear that expression in an Asana Tokef? On Rosh Hashanah, the malachim themselves tremble. When Hashem judges mankind, when Hashem judges the world, the malachim themselves tremble. Now here's the question, why do the malachim tremble? You and I have spent our time incorrectly. You and I may have messed up. You and I may have used our existence in a way that we shouldn't have. But malachim are perfect. They don't sin. They don't fail. Why are they trembling? What are they afraid of? And Ramchal explains to us that we human beings live in a very, very dark world, and we don't have a clue to what's really going on. He explains that every physical entity has a spiritual counterpart. A rock has a spiritual counterpart. A blade of grass has a spiritual counterpart. Everything that Hashem created in the physical world, Hashem created something opposite it in the spiritual world. That spiritual part is responsible for the existence of the physical part, for its maintenance, and for everything that occurs to it. When Chazal say that every blade of grass has a malach, what that means is that every living entity has a spiritual force, a das nifrad, a separate type of malach who's responsible for its existence, for everything that happens to it, for keeping it around. And if you look at a tree, and if you look at a meadow, and if you look at a field, what you should be able to see, if we had different sets of eyes, is huge, huge groups of malachim, each responsible for one part. On top of them, malachim were responsible for everything involved. The spiritual world would be very, very crowded if it weren't for the fact that malachim don't take up any space. But every single physical entity has a spiritual counterpart. Okay, now, what happens when man uses the world properly? So Chazal tell us that if you use a table properly, that spiritual part of it becomes empowered. The spiritual part of it lights up. The spiritual part of it gets invigorated and gets chiyus. What happens if you use that very same table for something incorrect? You do an avera with it. What happens is you molded a koach hatumah. That means to say there's a spiritual, almost a black hole. You create a negative force, and that spiritual black hole now sucks out the kedusha, sucks out the holiness from the world. You see, the world we live in is constantly changing. Not the physical world, but the spiritual world, which is the underpinning of everything physical, is constantly changing. Hashem said to Adam Arishon, Tein daitcha, pay careful attention that you don't destroy my world. Hashem took Adam Arishon, showed him Gan Eden, showed him the beauty. Look at what I created. Look at my handiwork. Look how carefully it was all formed. Pay careful attention that you don't destroy it. What do you mean destroy it? Was he going to take down an axe and chop down the trees? But in fact, Adam did destroy it. Because every tree has a malach behind it. Every blade of grass has a malach behind it. That's kept in existence by the spiritual force. And when Adam Rishon sinned, he basically corrupted the world. He destroyed the spiritual entity behind it. And therefore the world itself was radically different. And Hashem now had to run the world in a different way. We're not aware of it. We live in a very corporeal, physical world. But every action that we do changes the spiritual world. And that changes everything in creation. What happens when a human being does what they should is they give tremendous energy, tremendous power to this world. And when they do what's wrong, they damage it dramatically. Now, if that sounds highfalutin and you say like, okay, Rabbi, what are you talking about? I want to give you a mashal. We're all familiar with something called electricity. But often, we don't quite think about what electricity is. So almost all electricity is generated by another force. Typically, you'll have a turbine, something that spins. There'll be a magnet. The magnet is surrounded by copper wire. When the magnet moves past the copper wire, it moves the electrons in the copper wire. Copper wire conducts electricity well. And that force is electricity. Basically, the magnet moving the electrons in the copper wire, that is electricity. And all electricity is generated by turbines. It could be powered by burning gas, by burning coal, but it's all powered by something turning that magnet turning past the copper wire, the electrons in the copper wire moving, and that is how you generate electricity. Okay, now this is rather interesting. Why? Because the Texas State University decided to go green. They decided that, well, we could generate electricity in a very clean fashion. Why don't we hook up generators to elliptical machines? And they spent $20,000 as an experiment to hook up 30 elliptical machines to generators. So now when a man would get on the elliptical machine, that energy would cause the turbine, would cause the magnet to move up past the copper wire. And this would be a way that people could generate electricity. And this was an experiment. And they tried doing it. So here's what they found. When a person gets on an elliptical machine, it is true. You generate some output. And when that output is converted into electricity, you could generate about 100 watts an hour. But a light bulb, one light bulb, uses about 100 watts an hour. So meaning to say, if you got on your elliptical machine and you were using that to generate electricity, you might generate 1% of the electricity that you yourself would use. So what they found was that these 30 elliptical machines generated about $387 worth of electricity. After 57 years, it would pay back the $20,000 that it cost to put the generators to. And what they found was this is not a very efficient way of generating electricity. Would you like to know what is an efficient way of generating electricity? Near my home is something called Indian Point. 2 nuclear reactors that are constantly pumping out. When we talk about megawatts, we're talking thousands of millions of watts an hour. 25% of New York City is powered by these 2 reactors. One single reactor generates 100 million times what one human being can generate on an elliptical machine. And if you'd like to understand what the Ramchal is saying, I'll give you a mashal that I think explains it well. Imagine we have a man here on an elliptical machine, and he's pumping away. All he's producing is but a little bit of energy, about 100 watts an hour. But imagine with me for a moment that that elliptical machine were tied to a nuclear reactor above. Imagine that that elliptical machine were actually powering a nuclear reactor, so that his little actions over here, the output of 100 watts, were actually generating 100 million times that above. And what he was doing was powering cities. Now, he may not be aware of it, but the Ramchal explains that's exactly what happens when a person fulfills a mitzvah. We live in a corporeal, physical world, and in this very dark world, we think we do very small things. We blow a shofar, we put on tefillin, we learn big deal. And it is true. In the physical world, what we did was very little. But in the upper world, in the spiritual world, we lit up the cities. We lit up a world. We don't see it, we don't perceive it, but that's exactly what's happening. And when you begin to understand this, you begin to understand something phenomenal that begins to explain almost every mitzvah. I'll share with you one simple observation. There's a mitzvah called blowing shofar. Why do we blow shofar? The Rambam explains it, the Sefer Chinuch explains it. The reason is because shofar has a power to awaken a person. When you hear the shofar blast, it awakens you, makes you realize you're doing tshuva, etc. So here's a little question. What happens if you space out during shofar blowing? You didn't pay attention at all. Are you yotzei in a mitzvah? But I have a bigger question. Not only yotzei in a mitzvah, what happens if I say, listen, this idea of shofar waking me up, it's very good, but to be honest with you, a French horn is much more potent. When I hear a French horn blasting out, that fills me with trembling. So what do you think would happen if in my shul we said, no more shofar, we're going to have a French horn. I'll have a brass section. So here's the problem. I'm not yotzei in a mitzvah. But why? If the whole purpose of shofar is really to awaken you, why do you need a horn from a behemoth tahora, preferably an ayil, preferably a ram? Why should it be? Why do you need all the details? Or would you like to understand, in the physical world that we live in, it doesn't make a bit of difference. But in the physical world that we live in is very dark and very, very thick. In the upper world, what you're doing is changing upper world, and you're lighting up cities, but we don't understand it because we live in a very thick world, and because we live in this thick physical world, we're blinded. But the reason why Hashem gave us mitzvahs in the way and exact manner that Hashem gave it is because they accomplish things in the upper world that are way, way beyond our understanding. If you have a perfectly kosher pair of tefillin, but one letter is cracked, you did nothing. 0, efes. If you have a arba conflict, you have tzitzit, but 6 strings, so effectively 3 doubled and not 4, nothing. In fact, if you wear that on Shabbos, you might even be chayav fotzal for carrying. You might be chayav misa. But I don't get it. The whole purpose of tzitzit is just to remind us about the mitzvahs. You got the knots, you got the strings, so I'm missing 2. Why are you getting all bent out of shape? And if you search this earth from one end to the other, you won't find an answer. Because there is no answer under the sun. But once you understand that every mitzvah hooks into the upper world, once you understand that when I'm on this elliptical machine, yes, I'm pumping out 100 watt, but it's powering a nuclear reactor, it's lighting up cities in the upper world, it's empowering the upper world, you're changing the very level of kedusha in the world. And the opposite, when you do an avera, it powers kochos atuma, it creates these spiritual black holes that suck away the kedusha in the world. And what you and I see as human beings is but a tip of the iceberg. The Ramchal explains that when Hashem gave us this neshama elyona, it's not just as a guide, But Hashem wanted to give every human being the opportunity to be a builder, to be a creator of worlds. And what that means is I, little me, can create entire worlds or destroy entire worlds. Why did Hashem do that? Because Hashem wanted to give the human being, Adam, the opportunity to be as great as imaginable, or the opposite. And the purpose of everything in creation is man. Do you know why the Malachim tremble? Because mankind, the Jewish nation, is being judged. And if they're judged l'ra, then the world, everything in creation is toast. Everything that was created was put in the world for Adam. And if man has failed, and if Adam hit the point where it's no longer serving the purpose that man was supposed to, everything in creation ceases to exist. That means the fish, the oceans, the rivers, the upper worlds, the malachim, the seraphim, of everything, the cosmos. Because everything that came into existence was put into existence for man and man alone. It's not that Peter are slightly off. They're so backwards. They're so behind what life is about. Because they're clued strictly into a physical world. And if you view yourself much like Elsie the cow, then you're right. Don't eat that hamburger, because that hamburger is the same as you. You're the same as Elsie the cow. Once you understand that the human being was created for something so much larger, and that Hashem invested in the human this capacity to change up a world, to light up worlds, or the opposite, create kochos atumah, create spiritual black holes, you begin to realize our actions are way, way bigger, way, way more important than you could ever imagine. But there's one more effect that happens to Neshama Elyona when it does what's right or what's wrong. You see, when I do a mitzvah, my Neshama Elyona is hooked into the upper world, and it causes cities to light up. And therefore, the world itself is given more Kedusha, but therefore my Neshama Elyona is given more Kedusha as well. It becomes holier, and it influences me to a much greater extent. Let's say I do something wrong, and then my Neshama Elyona, against its will, is forced to create kochas atumah. It's forced to create these powerful spiritual black holes that not only influence the world, that influence it to the bad as well, and begin pulling it down, then it pulls me down. You see, there's a pass-through. And if you'd like to really understand the human being, and I hope I don't lose you with this, but watch. Let's go back to our Siamese twin mashal. Would you like to really understand what's happening? We have two distinct people sharing one blood supply, and they get drunk. Well, both get drunk. But what happens if when they get drunk, they become violent? What if they become a really ugly, nasty drunk? What if every time they get drunk, they start punching things and breaking things and get into a fist fight and become violent and very... So then we're not just dealing with an issue of, I don't like getting drunk and you do. Then we're dealing with, what are you doing? You're gonna get us arrested. You're gonna get us killed. What are you doing? Ladies and gentlemen, if you understood the human being, you'd understand that's exactly what's happening. My Neshama Elyona is pure, it's Kodesh, and knows exactly what it's doing here. And it says to me, let's go. Hashem gave you this unbelievable opportunity to change yourself, change the world you live in, light up the upper worlds. And then it watches me get drunk. I listen to Nefesh Bahami, I get drunk with anger or jealousy, whatever it may be, and then I don't just get drunk, I start doing things that are destructive. I say nasty, hurtful things. I say things, I do things that destroy the upper world, that destroy the world here. And my Neshama Elyona is saying, what are you doing, you fool? You're destroying us. You're not just being drunk, rolling in the mud. You're getting drunk, destroying people, destroying yourself. What are you doing? And if you could imagine the turmoil, the tremendous tsar that the Neshama Elyona has, it's beyond description. And if this is not complicated enough, and if the you and I isn't complex enough, let me take one more step. Do you ever notice that most people aren't happy? Some people aren't happy some of the time. Some people aren't happy a lot of the time. Some people aren't happy most of the time. But most people are unhappy. And you have to wonder, why is it? All of us have we have clothing, by and large, we have nice homes. By and large, we have enough food to eat. And there's one simple reason. Because there is an Neshama Elyona within me that's saying, what are you doing? What are you wasting your time for? Why aren't you accomplishing? You know what you're put on the world to be doing? You could be lighting up cities. You could be accomplishing worlds. You know what you could be doing? You're frittering your time. You're on social media. What are you doing? You're wasting hours. You could be doing things. What are you doing? And there's a powerful voice within me that doesn't let up, that keeps bothering me and bothering me. Say, why aren't you doing great things? And a human being has two choices. Either he listens to that voice and changes and begins setting lofty goals and really sets his path, or what typically happens is he either implodes or fights against that voice. Some people just get depressed and down, but some people actually fight against that voice. And you can almost hear the internal struggle. What do you mean I'm not great? You know what I'm doing? You think I'm not great? I'm making money, I'm famous, I'm writing books, everybody knows. Do you know who I am? And if you'd like to understand what an arrogant person is, all you have to understand is that there's a voice inside that's saying, why aren't you powering cities? Why aren't you generating 100 million watts an hour? And he gets on the elliptical and he says, I'm 7 hours a day, 700 watts today. Whoa, look at me. I made money. Wow, look what I did. And the neshama says, you fool, 700 watts. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of times that production. And no matter what he does, that neshama Yonah is never satisfied. No matter if he gets 800 watts that day, 1,200 watts, he's on it all day long. His upper soul isn't satisfied, isn't impressed. And if you'd like to understand arrogance, it's an unmet greatness of man. And I'd like to share with you one classic example. In the first century, there was an emperor, Caligula. Caligula sent a message to the Chachamim that he's furious. Every single religion puts his statue, a statue of him in their temple. And the Jews will not erect a statue of him in their temple. He's furious with them. The Chachamim sent a contingency to placate him, and they said, Your Majesty, this year alone, we already brought 3 sacrifices in Caligula's honor. He gets up and says, exactly what I meant. You bring sacrifices for me, but not one sacrifice to me. Now, that's an arrogant person. But how do you understand that? How do you understand a person who's so inflated and so big? The answer is that is the human being. Because there's a voice inside that says, why aren't you powering cities? And he's got to answer, I am doing great things. I'm eternal. I'm immortal. I'm all powerful. And when you watch a truly arrogant person, that's what you're seeing. Would you like to understand Pshat in Bilam? Bilam was a very arrogant person. He was given a lofty neshama. And his neshama Elyon, his upper neshama, was screaming, why aren't you accomplishing worlds? God himself visit you. You should be doing tremendous things. And he said, I am doing tremendous things. I'm rich and I'm famous. Everybody knows me. And when God himself came to visit Bilam, Bilam had a problem because God didn't treat him like an equal. Listen, Hashem, a junior partner maybe I'll accept, but you talk to me like I'm a creation. You talk to me like I'm a human being. Like I don't go for that. Why was that? Because Bilam had a lofty neshama, and Bilam had a true understanding of who he was, but because he was pulling against that, instead of growing, instead of meeting that, he was becoming nothing. And because of that, he had a tremendous sense of not being fulfilled, constantly needing more honor. And when Hashem himself came to him, it wasn't enough. And he said to Hashem, I don't like the way you treat me. The king of Moab treats me with honor, because when a person becomes really that inflated, he really needs more and more. But again, why? Because the neshama Elyon, the upper neshama, really, really understands how great it should be, and really strives for that type of greatness, really was created to create worlds. And unless it does exactly that, it's going to ever be unsatisfied. Now, you may say, what in the world does this have to do with us? This is a lovely view of the upper worlds, a nice little study of the Ramchal, but what does it have to do with us, and what does it have to do with Yom Kippur? And I'd like to share with you that this has everything to do with Yom Kippur. Twice a day, a Jew is supposed to say the words of Tachnun. Do you ever pay attention to the words of Tachnun? David HaMelech failed in front of Am Va'ed, in front of every member of the Jewish people. He failed the biggest test of his life, and in front of the Jewish nation, he lived with Bathsheba. And for the rest of his life, he suffered embarrassment. And the words of Tachanun are the words that he said. Yagasti Banchasi, my groans are so powerful, I'm weakened by my groaning. My pillow is filled with tears. Each night, my bed becomes soaked with my tears. The man clearly suffered, and for the rest of his life, he suffered tremendous, tremendous tsar. But here's the problem. What does that have to do with me? Twice a day I'm supposed to say that? I'm supposed to fall on my arm and say these words? It makes no sense. What's it got to do with me? But even worse, read the words in Yom Kippur davening. Ashamnu, Baganu, Gazal, and you go through the list. Now, I don't claim to be a tzaddik, but wait a minute, that's me? What's that got to do with me? Okay, I do things wrong, I admit it. I have to work on things. But such a detailed, long, what's it got to do with me? And would you like to understand what pshat in this is? If you view yourself, much like Elsie the cow, if you view yourself in a physical sense only, you'll have no answer to that question. Because you don't understand who you are, and you don't understand the ramifications of your actions. Rabbi Machai explains, Rabbi Yonah says it more clearly, the first thing you need to do tshuva is to understand who you are. And I'd like to give you a guarantee. If you are the most inflated ego in the world, I guarantee you sell yourself short. I guarantee that you don't have an inkling to how important you are, how significant your actions are. And if we could ever tap into the Torah's understanding of how huge our actions, our thoughts, our words are, we would be blown away with the dramatic impact that my words have, my actions have. Do you know who I am? I'm an Adam, a human being. I'm a human being who, when I keep Shabbos, I'm a partner in my Sabratius, I'm a partner with Hashem. What do you mean a partner with Hashem? I didn't create worlds. I don't know how to make Saturn, I don't know how to make a sun. But Hashem put me in the world in such a way that when I use this world properly, the upper worlds are given energy. It's like I am their creator. I sustain them and I keep them in existence. And as such, I'm a partner with Hashem. If you and I had a clue to the gravity of our actions, to the impact of our thoughts and ways, we'd be blown away. We'd be just mesmerized by our significance. And it has a very real implication. And that is that when we mess up, it's big time. Meaning to say, it's not just words of Lashon Hara. It's not just words I said that embarrass somebody. It's not just that I spoke at the wrong time. It's a major, major big deal. And you have to tap into the effect in the upper worlds. And have to tap into what you do to realize the grand significance of it. And it's only when you begin reading about different punishments that Chazal bring, and it's only when you begin thinking about it on some level, and you read the words of Tachana and you say, that's supposed to apply to me. That means my actions are way, way bigger than I thought they were. But ladies and gentlemen, this point is not about feeling charata, not about feeling bad. Do you know what it really means? Hashem created us to grow, and Hashem wants our success. And Chazal tell us that 500 times the reward is times to the punishment. Meaning anything that I've done wrong that is severely punished, everything I did right is rewarded 500 times the amount of a punishment. That means to say, if one time I put on tefillin, do you know what I did in the upper world? You know what I did to my neshama elyon? You know what I did? I changed the world. If one time I davened and I actually spoke to Hashem, if one time I gave stuck properly, if one time I held my tongue and I didn't speak Lashon Hara, do you know what I accomplished? Not a big deal. Whatever, I put on tefillin, I learned, I davened. Come on, what am I doing? I'm not changing. I'm just a regular human being. Exactly. If you view the world in its very myopic, very small version, then you're doing nothing. If you're able to open your eyes, and you're able to understand what you're doing in the upper world, you're changing upper world. What you're doing is phenomenal. What you're doing is lighting up cities. If I say Kriya Shema one time right, I get all the words, and I have the right kavanah, I lit up an upper world that remains for eternity lit up. But I don't see it. Very nice, you don't see it. There's a lot we don't see. We don't see electricity going through walls. We don't see Wi-Fi. We don't see my cell phone in my pocket speaking to a satellite 3 miles up, sending a cell phone message. But because I don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think this Chazal shares with us a very eye-opening perspective. What Bilam was a lofty neshama. And because he was lofty, he understood. His neshama elyon was screaming, and I'm a company, grow, light up cities. And because there was such a powerful pull to him, and he wasn't doing that, he had this need to fill it. I am great, I'm important, I'm significant, I'm bigger than that. He got so big in his own mind that God himself treated him not like an equal. You treat me not like an equal? How could you know who I am? And if it sounds insane, that's exactly what arrogance is. Any sense of arrogance is a desire for greatness that's true. It's a godless Adam that's misdirected. If you and I had a clue to our importance or significance, we'd be blown away. The biggest Balgaiva, find me the most arrogant man in the world. Find me a Caligula the emperor who says you should be sacrificing to him. He sells himself short. You and I are bigger than that. You and I, our actions are accomplish more. But again, you have to hook into the upper worlds. You have to understand this. When you understand this, you understand the value of a mitzvah. You understand why there's such precision. Why is there such exactitude in every mitzvah? You got to do it this way. 10 Allah Moshe Messina and Tefillin. And miss one, you didn't do anything. Shofar has to be exactly right. And if the tekiah is shorter than the shvarm, you're not yotzei. Why did you yotzei? It woke me up. It did everything. The answer is because in the physical world, you're right. It didn't make much of a difference. But Hashem gave us his ability to hook up into the upper world. And it's much like that man on that elliptical machine. He's only cranking out 100 watts an hour. He's doing nothing. Big deal, 100 watt an hour, it's nothing. But that 100 watt is powering a nuclear furnace above, and that nuclear furnace is pumping out 100 million times the production. And what he's doing with his small actions is powering upper worlds. When you think about this, when you dwell on it, you begin to understand things in a vastly different way. And you begin to understand what it means to stand in front of Hashem and ask for tshuva, ask for mechila, ask for forgiveness. When you understand the impact of one sin, you understand I created a spiritual black hole. And it's a powerful spiritual black hole that sucks out the Kedusha from this world. And I don't mean a big Avera even, I mean a little Avera. It creates a huge negative black hole that pulls away Kedusha. And there is a concept called tshuva, and Hashem gave his ability to just get rid of those black holes, one after another after another. If a person uses the tshuva system, it gets rid of them, it rids his soul, it rids the world of them. But more than anything, when you begin to understand the impact of your actions, you can look at yourself differently. On Yom Kippur, a person can feel things that you don't feel during the rest of the year. And on Yom Kippur, you could realize my actions are bigger than anything I could ever imagine. My words have more effect, more impact than anything I could ever dream of. And when you think about that, you then set your course very carefully. What am I going to accomplish? What am I going to do this year? Where am I headed? And I want to close with one little illustration. In 1988, a British TV program showed a man sitting in a live audience. The live audience was filled with middle-aged people. This man was sitting there with his wife. And the reason why everyone was gathered there was because this man had held a secret, a huge secret for 50 years. And the TV host was about to reveal the secret to the people in the audience as well as to the world at large, and justice was to be served. You see, that man's name was Nicholas Winton. And in 1938, Nicholas Winton was in Czechoslovakia. He was a British citizen. He was not in the armed forces, and he was not a representative of the British government. He was in Czechoslovakia, and he saw what was happening. And he saw that the Jews there were in grave danger. And he arranged for Jewish children to leave Czechoslovakia and go to England. And he arranged for them to have places to live. He arranged their transportation. He got no support. He raised money on his own. He arranged everything himself. In the end, he saved 699 children. Their parents mostly were sent to Auschwitz, but 699 children, he alone, he had some friends, he saved, he brought them to England, put them into homes. That fact remained largely unknown to anyone. He didn't talk about it, he didn't discuss it. 50 years later, his wife was up in the attic, and she finds a scrapbook. In the scrapbook are pictures of the children. In the scrapbook are dates of birth. In the scrapbook are the exact houses where they landed. She took that scrapbook and she brought it to a TV reporter because she wanted that story out. The TV reporter invited Nicholas Winton down to this meeting. He didn't know it, but the other people in the room were all those children who survived. And at a certain point, the TV host explained why they were all there. Everyone stands up applauding, and he alone at that moment recognized the wonder of the fact that these were the children who had now grown, had families of their own, and he recognized fully what he had accomplished. This man, Nicholas Winton, died in 2015 at the age of 105. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely believe that when he leaves this earth, when he left this earth, the reward that's awaiting him is unimaginable. Because you see, 699 children doesn't stop there. They get married, have children of their own, have grandchildren. And that 699 Jewish children has a way of just multiplying and multiplying. And I can't even imagine when he leaves this earth what his reward was, the extent and the grand parade of thousands and thousands of neshamas that would be paying homage to him, and the amount of good, hard to envision. But here's the point. Let's say you went to this fellow. Let's say you went to Nicholas Winton in 1938 and said, do you know that these 699 children, they're going to get married, and they're going to have children of their own and grandchildren. Do you know you're saving thousands and thousands? Can you imagine what you're doing? I'm sure he would have said to you, no, I can't imagine what I'm doing. But it doesn't matter. This is what's right. These are children. They don't deserve to be killed, and I'm going to do what's right. My friends, I believe that's a powerful mashal. We're never going to really fully get the gravity of our actions. We're never going to fully feel it. I guarantee when we leave this earth, we're going to be astounded, because every action we do creates a powerful, powerful spiritual force. And there'll be thousands and millions and powerful, powerful cadres, hundreds of thousands marching out there. It'll be unbelievable beyond anything we can imagine. And the truth is, we can't imagine it now, and we don't have to. I have to know that Hashem wants me to grow. I have to know that Hashem loves every one of His creations. I have to know that Hashem wants me to do what's right and proper, and therefore I have to set my course exactly as Hashem wants. Kippur is a time to take stock. It's a time to get rid of things we've done wrong. It's a time to set my course to things to do right, to hook into the upper world as much as I can, to understand things. But at the end of the day, I have a Torah, I have mitzvahs. That's what I have to do. May Hashem grant us the wisdom, understanding, ability to put this into practice. By the way, anyone wants something powerful, a powerful trick that I guarantee will make an astonishing difference in your year, more than anything else you could possibly do. I know everybody gets, people get real from by Neela, I'm going to change, and they're looking, give me something. I got a simple thing. Ready for this? Gentlemen, I'll put this on your side first. Take your wife out once a week. Make a firm commitment to take your wife out once a week. I guarantee it'll be the biggest tshuva you ever did. But what's that going to do with tshuva? Oh, it's very simple. Think of the last time you got into a fight. Think about onoz dvarim, the words that you said to your wife and your wife said to you. And I don't care who started it, I'm not interested in that. But the words you say, the hurtful, biting words. Two people are supposed to be the closest confidants, supposed to be lovers, who are literally almost biting each other's head off. And just pay attention to that and realize that the single greatest change you could make is to improve your relationship. You see, if your relationship is better, everything is better. Now, that doesn't make you a tzaddik, and you still may lose your temper, your wife may still, I'm not discussing that. But if the climate of your marriage is one of love, then all of a sudden, things are very different. You're not biting each other's heads off anywhere near as much. You're acting like lovers are supposed to. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, that doesn't sound very religious. I'm making a Kabbalah to go out once a week. That's a religious, that's about as big a religious commitment as you're going to make. Why? Because it'll really change your behaviors more significantly than anything else you're going to do. I'm going to learn Mussar for 2 hours a day. Very nice. You're not going to change your temper that quickly. Take you 20 years. Well, I'm going to I'm going to work. Yeah, very nice. Slowly, lot. This single Kabbalah, this single acceptance will change your behavior radically. If you improve your relationship, guess what? Everything changes. You act differently, you feel differently, and okay, you know what I'm saying? Why can't I just be happy? Why? You know why? Because that's not what God made you to do. When you take a surgical instrument, take a scalpel and use it to pry open a window, it does a lousy job and it dulls a blade. Hashem created the human being for a very specific purpose, to grow, to accomplish, change myself, change the world I live in. When I use my life that way, there's an inner sense of harmony, inner sense of peace. If I use my life for anything else, I could have all the luxuries, all the everything. But there's inside there's an emptiness. Why? Because guess what? That's not the way Hashem made you, and you're not doing what you were made to do. And we human beings get very comfortable living in a Wi-Fi world. We have to sort of also take that step in terms of bigger things as well, and understanding that you're right. It's a big jump, and that's really why I use that closing story, because we don't really live in the upper world. We live in this world. And my job is to do the mitzvahs the way the Torah says to do it. But sometimes you need to understand, why is the Torah so exact? Why every mitzvah is so precise and do one little thing off and boom, you didn't do anything. It doesn't make sense. Why should it be that way? So again, in this physical world, it will not make sense. Once you understand that it's kind of like, by the way, you ever take your cell phone and drop it into the toilet? And suddenly it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? It's all the same. Why shouldn't it? I don't understand why it doesn't work. I'll tell you a little secret. You're right, it should work, except one little problem. You fried the circuits, and you're done. Now, if you don't want to think about how it works, you'll never get it. But once you understand this, you understand mitzvahs, you understand why Torah is so exact, you understand the impact of your actions. So you're right, we don't live in the upper world, but it's important to be aware of this so that I can then do the mitzvahs the way I'm supposed to, I can learn as I'm supposed to, I can understand on some level what I'm doing. I don't live there, but being aware of it helps me live in the world I do live. You know what I'm saying? What is arrogance? Arrogance is a true understanding of my great, is this pulling from above that says, you should be great. You should be great. You should be lighting up worlds. You should be doing phenomenal things. Now, I have two choices. I could either implode, say, you're right, I'm nobody, I'm nothing, I'm worthless, I'm a jerk, and become a damaged human being, or I could fight against it. I am great. You know who I am? You know how important I am? I do great things. It's like that guy on the treadmill who says, I'm pumping out 400 watts a day, 700 watts, look what I'm doing. Don't tell me I'm not great. But his neshama is up in neshama saying, yeah, but I'm talking about 100 million times your production. I'm talking about lighting up a city, and you're talking about 200 watts, 300 watts. So what he did, well, I'll do more. I'll do 1,200. You're not going to tell me I'm low. I'm big. I'm big. The arrogant person has a constant need to become bigger and bigger and bigger than that. Why? Because he's trying to speak to that voice inside. He's using the wrong terms. He's using the wrong currency. And so anything he feeds it is never going to feed it, but he needs bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what you see arrogant people do. The arrogant person thinks he's going to live forever. He's all powerful. When you see a king saying, you didn't bring a sacrifice to me, what's pshat? Because when you allow yourself to become fully engaged in this arrogance, basically what's happening is you have an upper neshama saying, you should be great. I am great. You know how great I am. I'm mighty, I'm powerful, and I'm a king, and you should bow to me. Why? Because again, it's that same unmet need that you're trying to meet by self-inflating, by puffing yourself up, by being big. Bilam had a high neshama. His neshama was saying to him, you should be really, really, really great. I am great. You know how big I'm so important. Bullock treats me with honor. This one treats me with everyone. He needed honor. Here, watch this. You ever notice, watch this. What's the hallmark of an arrogant person? The arrogant person says, you're small, you're small, you're small, you're tiny, I'm big, you're tiny. So why is it that the arrogant person always needs everyone's attention? If you're nobody, you're nobody, you're nobody, why does he need you to pay attention to him? You're nobody. He's somebody, right? He doesn't need you. You're nothing. You're nobody. Why does he need you to compliment him? Why does he always need your attention? The answer is he's trying to puff himself up, but it's not real. He's constantly trying to puff, but it's constantly coming down because it's fake. And the more he becomes inflated, the more he's constantly, like one of those, air balloons that you got to constantly puff up. He was at a point where when God treated him like just an important human being, I mean, listen, God, you treat me as a junior partner might be one thing, but don't treat me like just a creation, like I'm your servant or something like that, please. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's Pshat and Rashi. By the way, I always wanted to have Hak Tishmuz after. We never did this before. All right, we're good, folks? Okay, I wish you all a good Gemar Shur, a Gemar Tov, and much, much Hatzlacha.